Madam Chair, my name is Tyrone Obaseki, and I represent Angel Reach and a foster youth-led advocacy group called BRAVE. Regarding the question as to whether we can work towards improving the policy and contract oversight within the child welfare system, I feel like we should make sure that there is some type of policy against restraints. I feel like the agency does not do a lot to address that issue. Yes. And a restraint is when a foster child or somebody is in a group home is physically placed on the ground and their arm is pressed up to the extent to where they cannot breathe. And it is used to ensure their docility. It's just used to reprimand them. As a mental health clinician now, I see a lot of young people step into my office and they talk about that type of abuse. And so somewhere in policy and in the contracts, we need to make sure that that's not happening to any of our young people. Because if we expect them to come out and graduate college, we need to make sure that they're not being abused in care. Yes, ma'am. I was placed in CPS custody at the age of 2 months old.
And was this an experience that you had?
Yes, it was a experience that I saw other young people in the group homes deal with as well. Earlier, what you said was, well, how come you didn't report it? Because if it's the norm for everybody that you see in the group home, why would anybody report that to a caseworker? Also, the caseworker does not always come out on the regular basis. So I think that also leads back to we need to make sure that we aren't placing children in environments that aren't conducive to their growth and development. That should be in the contract as well. Because as a grown man, I shouldn't have to remember the screams of young girls at night because they were restrained. They could have had a bad day. But to make sure that the young people are in their rooms, you get a restraint. I also have a document that also shows that I was restrained in a psych hospital for not taking medication. That's unacceptable. So I'm hoping that in policy, in the contracts, it will show that you cannot physically abuse a child in that capacity, because that's also corporal punishment. And policy does reflect that you can't do that, but it's not implemented.
You brought this up, and you don't have to answer this, but you stated that you were restrained in a psych hospital for not taking medication. Was this medication that was prescribed for reasons of being in the psychiatric facility?
The reason I was placed in the psych hospital was because at the age of 4, I was placed at a level 6 facility instead of given a foster home. And so I learned behaviors from other traumatized children. That's why I was placed in the psych hospital. And so they use those drugs just to help me cope instead of providing extensive counseling and a mentor to make sure I can establish a sense of symbiosis, attachment with somebody. The drug was just to make sure I can be nice and docile.
So you said that you were placed in foster at 2 months.
I was placed in CPS at 2 months old.
CPS at 2 months. And when did you go into foster? Were you reunited with your family at some point?
Actually, I was reunited with my family for just a couple of months, and my biological grandmother turned me back in because my mother has a history of exhibiting foul and dangerous behaviors towards us. So they did try to place me into a couple of foster homes, but they eventually shipped me to a group home at the age of 4. And I do not understand as to whether, I don't understand why they put me in a group home instead of having me adopted at that age.
Did you have siblings?
I did have 2 siblings. We were estranged from one another. We had a couple of visits, every now and then, and their situations were similar. They were restrained. At one point, my sisters came to visit me, and they stayed at the group home, which is in Houston, and they also were restrained. They also were abused, and to this very day, my sister, she has an explosive demeanor. She has rage. She has anger. She's still struggling to cope because of what happened to her while she was in the system. And so this may seem a little far-fetched, but I'm really asking that the policy reflects that you cannot do things that lead to the detriment of our children. And we can't sit in here and act baffled as to why the young people can't graduate college because of what we're doing to them.
This group home in Houston, is it still operating?
It's still operating. It's still operating, and there's several group homes that restrain that are still in operation.
Are they still restraining?
Well, we had an event with our organization, and some of the young people said, oh yeah, yes, I was restrained. And I went to a group home this past Thanksgiving just to talk and engage. Didn't ask permission. I just took initiative to go talk to my brothers and sisters in care. A young girl walked up to me and she said, oh wow, you were in foster care too? In a group home? Were you restrained? Did you go to the psych hospitals? That's how she was able to connect with me. That shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
What were you said to make you docile. Ones would say that certain actions were taken because the individuals became violent and aggressive. Was that the case?
There's a lot of jargon. Oh, well, this child was violent and aggressive. Well, if you have staff members who aren't trained with trauma-informed care, who don't know how to attach to a child, then perhaps the child will be violent and aggressive. If you're telling a child, go sit your ass down somewhere, instead of talking to the child like you would your own children, of course that child is going to respond in a bad manner. For every action, there is a reaction. Madam Chair, I had several staff members who showed up in scrubs. What that shows is, wow, well, you're a patient. So a lot of young people, they started acting like patients because of the way they treated them. I did have some explosive behavior because I saw other teenage boys who were very explosive. Because I had to figure out in my little head how to cope with sexual abuse at that age in the group home. So I didn't know how to respond to certain things. There was too much going on. I was moving from place to place. So sometimes, Madam Chair, the explosive behavior is because the staff members, they aren't doing what they're supposed to do for the children.
You said you had to learn to cope with sexual abuse.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that imply that you were abused?
Yes, ma'am, I was abused in the group home. I was sexually abused.
And was this reported?
Well, that goes back to, I thought that was the norm. At that age, I didn't know. It wasn't reported to my caseworker, but I did report it to the group home staff. When I look at my case file, it's not in there. It's not in there. So abuse is the norm nowadays. It's happening. That's the way we child rear.
And this group home that you are speaking of, you said is still open. Have you reported that group home to the agency?
Well, I have not reported the group home to the agency because I personally feel like the agency does not thoroughly investigate what's going on. And you can see that now with all this stuff that's going on with the child deaths. That's why we need the Ombudsman Office, because I do not trust the agency to thoroughly investigate the needs of our children.
Members, are there any questions of Tyrone? I want to thank you for your courage in speaking out. There are individuals from the agency who are here, and I think that they should know the names of both of the group homes that you were in, and have some affidavits of testimony.
It took a long time, Madam Chair, for some group homes to get shut down for the child deaths of several residents in their homes. So that's why I was questioning as to whether or not if talking to them would actually make a difference.
Well, do you need me in your presence to talk to them to see if it'll make a difference?
Sure.
I think they have that message now.
Okay. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Can we make that happen?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your testimony.